She woke in the Lakota camp with no memory, and he was the only one she trusted. She woke to the sound of distant drums and the warm flicker of firelight dancing across the inside of a buffalo hide lodge, her heartbeat stumbling as smoke-scented air filled her lungs and a dozen strangers' voices drifted through the canvas walls in a language she didn't understand. For a moment she didn't move, didn't breathe, didn't even blink, because something felt wrong, not painful, not sharp, but hollow, like a page torn out of her mind. She reached for a memory, any memory, her name, her age, her home. Nothing came. Panic crawled up her throat as she bolted upright, the blanket sliding from her shoulders, and the world blurred. Shadows, beads, feathers, smoke. And then the flap of the lodge whispered aside, and he stepped in, a Lakota warrior, tall, broad-shouldered, carrying the cold morning air with him as his dark braids fell over his chest, and his steady eyes locked on hers with such focused relief that her breath caught in her lungs. He knelt beside her instantly, not touching her, not crowding her, but close enough that she could feel the heat of his presence, and his voice, low, rough, steady, broke through her rising fear. "Easy," he whispered. "You're safe." She should have flinched. She should have pulled away. She should have been terrified of the stranger leaning so close, but instead, her body did something her mind couldn't explain. It leaned toward him. Her pulse slowed, her breath steadied, and before she even understood what she was saying, she heard her own voice whisper a name, his name, soft and trembling, like her heart recognized him before her memory ever had. He froze. Shock flickered across his usually unreadable face, as if he'd expected her to forget everything. Except that. "Do you know me?" he asked quietly, and she blinked, tears stinging her eyes, because she didn't know how to answer. She didn't know anything, not her past, not her purpose, not why her hands shook, but reached for him anyway. I don't know," she whispered. "I don't know anything." He exhaled slowly, his broad shoulders sinking as if he'd just carried her weight with his own. "You collapsed last night," he said gently, "down by the edge of the old trail. You were running from something." She shook her head helplessly. "I don't remember." "I know," he murmured. "The elders said you were struck on the head, the kind of strike that steals memory." She lifted trembling fingers to her temple. Feeling the faint swelling beneath her hair, and the dread inside her deepened. "I don't even know my name," she whispered. The warrior's eyes softened, painfully, beautifully, like her helplessness hit him in a place no one else could reach. He didn't offer a false comfort. He didn't pretend he knew her story. Instead, he reached for a small clay bowl beside the fire, dipping his fingers into cool water and offering it to her without pressing her to take it. She did, hands shaking, and he steadied the bowl as she drank. "Thank you," she murmured. He nodded once. "You're safe here," he repeated, but there was something in his tone this time, something heavier, something he wasn't saying. "Why are you looking at me like that?" she whispered. He didn't answer immediately. He only watched her with an intensity that made her skin warm and her heartbeat rise. Then finally he said it. "Because you kept saying one thing before you passed out." Her breath halted. "What? What did I say?" His voice dropped to a near whisper. "You kept asking for me." The world tilted. She stared at him, startled, her chest tightening with a feeling she didn't understand. I don't know why," she stammered. "I don't even know who I am." He leaned back slightly, not pulling away but giving her enough space to breathe, his gaze shifting to the lodge entrance where morning light glowed against the hide. "Maybe," he said quietly. "You don't remember your name, but your heart remembers something." Her fingers tightened around the blanket. "What does it remember?" He finally met her eyes again, steady, dark, and full of a quiet, aching truth. "Me," he said. "It remembers me." The warrior didn't touch her as she tried to steady her breath, but he rose slowly, like a man afraid that any sudden movement might shatter whatever fragile truth sat between them, and held the lodge flap open just wide enough for sunlight to spill in, allowing her eyes to adjust to the wider world beyond. She hesitated before standing, her legs unsteady beneath her, and when she stepped outside, the Lakota camp came into view in a blur of color and sound. Hides stretched between poles, women grinding corn, children chasing each other around a fire pit, horses snorting softly near the corral, and warriors sharpening spears as elders murmured prayers to the rising sun. Everything should have overwhelmed her, but somehow it didn't. The noise, the faces, the strange words swirling in the morning air. And she didn't understand why until she realized she was matching her footsteps to his without thinking, staying near his side as if her body knew she would be safe there, even when her mind fought for direction. Her fingers brushed her own wrist, searching for something familiar, but there was nothing. No ring, no mark, no object that could anchor her to a past she'd lost. Yet, when the warrior glanced back to make sure she was close, her pulse jumped in a way that felt like recognition. "What's your name?" she asked quietly, trying to fill the hollow ache inside her with anything solid. He hesitated only a second. "Crowheart," she repeated it softly. Crowheart, and the name wrapped itself around her tongue with a strange, warm familiarity. "Did we know each other?" she whispered. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he guided her toward the edge of the camp where a small stream ran clear beside a circle of smooth stones, and knelt to wash his hands in the cold water while she stood behind him, waiting for a truth she wasn't sure she wanted. When he finally looked up, his eyes carried something weighty, as if he had been holding a truth inside him long before she ever stumbled into his world. "I didn't know your name," he said slowly, "until you spoke it last night." Her breath caught. "I spoke my name?" "No," he said softly. "You spoke mine." She blinked, confused. "But I don't remember you." "Memory is in the mind," Crowheart murmured, "but trust is in the spirit." She sank onto a nearby stone, her hands trembling as she stared into the stream. Fragments flickered at the edge of her consciousness, flashes of shadow, running feet, the sound of someone calling her name in fear. But the moments dissolved before she could grab them. "I don't know why I said your name," she whispered. "I don't know why I—" She stopped, unable to finish the sentence, but Crowheart finished it for her quietly. "Why you trusted me." Her heartbeat stuttered. "Yes." He sat across from her, the soft rush of the stream filling the space between their breaths. "When I found you, you were bleeding," he said. "Your head struck by something heavy. You ran until your legs gave out." She touched her temple again. "Who hurt me?" "We don't know," he said. "Not yet. But tracks were found near where you fell. A man's tracks, heavy boots. Someone pursued you." Her throat tightened with a fear she couldn't place. But Crowheart leaned forward, lowering his voice. "When I carried you back, you were barely conscious. You didn't remember where you came from or what chased you." She swallowed hard. "But I remembered you." His jaw tightened. Confliction flickering through his gaze as if her trust stirred something inside him he wasn't prepared for. "You didn't say words clearly," he said, "but you reached for me like you had known my hands your whole life." Her breath hitched, a strange heat filling her chest. "Why?" For the first time, Crowheart looked away toward the distant pines swaying in the morning wind, and his voice softened with a truth he hadn't dared to speak aloud until now. "Because before your memory broke," he said, "your spirit called for me." She stared at him, startled, her pulse rising like a drum. And he turned back to her with a gaze steady enough to anchor the storm inside her. "And I heard you," he whispered, "even before I knew your name." Crowheart didn't linger on the confession he'd made by the stream. Instead, he rose to his feet and offered her a small nod that meant follow, guiding her back toward the center of camp, where the scent of burning sage drifted from the large medicine lodge. The hide door was painted with symbols she didn't understand. Circles, thunderbirds, handprints in red dye, and when she stepped inside, the air thickened with smoke, warmth, and the rhythmic rattle of beads hanging from the roof poles. An elder woman waited beside a low fire, her long braids streaked with gray, her eyes sharp and seeing too much in an instant. Crowheart spoke to her in Lakota, and though she couldn't understand the words, she recognized the tone, concern threaded with a quiet urgency. The elder beckoned her closer with a gentle hand. "Sit," she said in accented English. She obeyed, lowering herself onto a woven mat as the elder placed a bowl of steaming herbs in front of her. "Breathe this," the woman said. "It helps the mind find what it lost." She leaned over the bowl, inhaling the sharp, earthy scent, and warmth filled her chest, spreading like a soft fire through her ribs, steady, grounding. Shadows danced behind her eyes. The elder's voice softened to a whisper. "Tell me what you see." At first, nothing came. Only blackness and a dull ache pressing against the back of her skull. Then, like a spark in the dark, images flickered. A horse's hooves pounding through dust. A man's voice shouting her name, except it wasn't her name. It wasn't a name she recognized at all. She gasped, pulling back, her heart thudding hard. I don't know who that is," she whispered. Crowheart crouched beside her immediately. "What did you see?" "A man," she said, rubbing her forehead, trying to piece the fragments together. "Tall, dark coat. I heard him shouting, but he wasn't calling me what you called me. He used a different name." The elder and Crowheart exchanged a look she couldn't read. "What name?" he asked quietly. She swallowed. "Mara." Crowheart's brow furrowed. "Does that feel familiar?" "No," she said. "It feels wrong." The elder placed her hands gently against the sides of her head, fingertips warm against her temples. "Memory can confuse voices," she murmured. "Show me again." The herbs were pushed closer. She leaned in, forcing her breath to slow, and the warmth curled deeper into her chest until the shadows reshaped themselves, clearer this time, sharper. A flash of a silver ring on someone's hand, a wooden fence, blood on a stone. A scream, hers or someone else's, she couldn't tell. She jerked upright again, shaking, grabbing Crowheart's wrist without thinking. "That wasn't my memory," she whispered. I don't feel it belonged to me." Crowheart's jaw set. "But you saw it." "Yes, and it scared me." The elder nodded slowly, her eyes narrowing as she studied the tremble in the girl's shoulders. "Sometimes," the elder said, "a spirit tries to return someone else's pain first. Something is warning you." She shivered. "Warning me of what?" The elder sat back, her expression shifting into something solemn, ancient. "You were found on sacred ground," she said. "Land where memory and spirit cross paths. Something chased you there, something that does not want you to remember your own truth yet." Her breath faltered. Crowheart's hand tightened around hers, not possessive, not claiming, but steadying in a way that nearly unraveled her. "You are not alone," he said firmly. "Whatever chased you, it did not follow you here." She wanted to believe him. She wanted to lean into the warmth of his presence and let herself trust the strange instinct that told her she was safe in his shadow. But as another fragment flashed behind her eyes, a woman screaming, a hand forcing her backward, the gleam of the same silver ring, she realized something chilling. That memory didn't belong to her, but she recognized the fear in it, and somehow, impossibly, she felt that whoever the man in the coat was, he wasn't finished. Crowheart saw the terror in her eyes and shifted closer, his voice low and solemn. "Whatever you saw," he murmured, "it is not stronger than the truth waiting inside you." But she wasn't so sure, because the truth, her truth, felt like it was hiding behind someone else's nightmare. Crowheart didn't let go of her hand until her shaking eased, and even then he released her slowly, as if afraid the moment he stepped back the fragments haunting her would swallow her whole. The elder murmured something soft in Lakota and lifted the hide flap, signaling that Crowheart should take her to the one person who carried answers older than the camp itself. He guided her across the open ground toward a larger lodge, painted with sweeping black lines and red circles. Symbols she didn't understand but felt in her bones, the kind that made the hair along her arms rise just by standing near them. Inside, the air was warm and thick with the scent of cedar and burning sweetgrass, and an older man, broad-shouldered despite his age, braids threaded with white, eyes sharp as flint, waited beside a low fire. He was the chief, she realized instantly, not because Crowheart said a word, but because authority lived in the quiet way he sat, in the way the flames seemed to bend toward him instead of away. She lowered herself onto the woven mat he gestured toward, her heartbeat thudding as Crowheart took a place at her side, his knee nearly brushing hers. "You were found on ground that does not often allow the living to cross it," the chief began, voice deep and steady. "Do you understand what that means?" She shook her head. I don't understand anything." The chief nodded as if he expected that answer. "Some places," he said, "hold memory the way the river holds reflections. Sometimes those memories—" Cling to the wrong soul. Her stomach twisted. Are you saying the visions I saw weren't mine because the land pushed them into me? The chief studied her a long moment, then spoke with the slow gravity of a man accustomed to bridging the world of spirit with the world of breath. The memory you saw belongs to someone who bled on that ground, he said. A woman whose own truth was never spoken. A woman whose pain was never carried away. Crow's heart stiffened. The silver ring trail, he murmured. Yes, the chief replied. Her spirit still lingers. The back of her neck prickled, her pulse racing. But why me? Why would I see her memories and not my own? Because you were struck hard enough to break your mind open, the chief said gently. An empty room is easier for another's voice to enter. She swallowed hard, her palms turning cold. Am I supposed to do something? Fix something? The chief leaned forward, elbows resting on his knees. Before we speak of what must be done, we must understand what was done to you. His gaze flicked to Crowheart. Tell her how she was found. Crowheart inhaled slowly, turning toward her. You were lying beside the old trail, he said, face down, breathing uneven, your dress torn at the shoulder. She froze. Was someone with me? Crowheart's voice tightened. Footprints, a man's, heavy, fast-moving. They circled you, stood over you, then left in haste. Heat drained from her face. The silver ring flashed again in her mind. The scream, the fence, the hand pushing downward. Not hers, not her voice. But the terror was familiar, uncomfortably familiar. Do you think he hurt me? She whispered. The chief didn't soften the truth. Someone struck you hard enough to steal your memory, he said. Someone chased you onto ground where spirits speak loudly. Her breath faltered, and Crowheart's hand brushed the back of hers in a quiet offer of steadiness that made her heart twist. You called my name, he said, even when you couldn't remember your own. She blinked fiercely. Why? Why would I know your voice if I don't know my own past? Crowheart didn't answer, because he didn't know, but the chief did. Because when a spirit is hunted, the chief said, it runs toward the soul it trusts most. She whipped her gaze to him. But how could I trust him if I don't even know him? The chief's eyes softened with something like pity and gravity at once. Memory of the mind fades, he said, but memory of the spirit does not. She stared at Crowheart, breath trembling. And he held her gaze with something fierce and unspoken. The chief leaned back, letting the firelight flicker across the painted lodge walls. Your past is coming, he said. The man who took your memories, his shadow's already reaching for you. A shiver tore down her spine. How do you know? The chief's reply was simple, terrifying, final. Because the spirit whose memories you saw, she was not the only one he hurt. And Crowheart's hand closed fully around hers, not protectively, but as if anchoring her to the earth itself. The chief's words were still sinking into her bones when a sharp whistle cut through the camp, slicing the air like a blade and pulling every warrior's attention toward the northern ridge where riders were descending. The sound of hooves pounding against frozen earth, the jingle of harness, the dust rising in hard, fast clouds. Crowheart moved instantly, stepping in front of her with a reflex so swift and instinctive it stole her breath, but she pushed to her feet anyway, drawn by a sudden cold dread blooming in her stomach, the kind that didn't come from memory, but from something deeper, instinct, warning, the kind of fear the body remembers long after the mind forgets. Warriors gathered with quiet tension as 3 riders approached the camp boundary, the lead rider tall in the saddle, shoulders thick beneath a dark coat, hat brim low, face shadowed until he tugged the reins and slid down with a practiced ease that made her pulse stumble. He straightened, he lifted his head, and his eyes, cold, pale, cutting straight through her, locked on hers like he owned her breath. Her knees nearly buckled, not because she knew him, but because her body reacted as if it did. Crowheart shifted closer, blocking part of her from view, but the stranger's gaze tracked her past him, sharp and hungry with familiarity. There you are, the man said, voice smooth as worn leather but carrying a dangerous undertone she felt in her spine. I've been looking everywhere for you. A murmur rippled through the Lakota warriors, but no one moved. They waited, watching Crowheart, waiting for his cue. She couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. Her throat felt scraped raw. The man stepped forward, just 2 steps, but enough to make her entire body recoil backward. Who are you?" she managed. His expression flickered with mock hurt. "Who am I?" He chuckled darkly. "Sweetheart, I'm your husband." The words hit her like a thrown stone. Her stomach turned. Crowheart's hand shot out, palm raised in a silent command. "Stop," he said, voice low and lethal. The stranger froze, not out of fear, but out of calculation, measuring Crowheart, recognizing a threat he didn't want to underestimate. "Is this how your people welcome a man coming for his wife?" the stranger asked, tone slick with condescension. "By letting her hide behind a warrior like some trembling fawn?" She flinched at the word wife. But the fear rising inside her had nothing to do with embarrassment and everything to do with the echo of a voice screaming. Not hers, but one she had seen in the vision, calling out as a hand shoved her backward and a silver ring flashed in the sun. Her breath hitched. She stared at the man's left hand. A ring glimmered on his finger. Silver, just like the memory that didn't belong to her. Her blood went cold. "Crowheart," she whispered, barely a sound. He moved a fraction closer, his body aligning with hers as if forming a shield she didn't have to ask for. "You say she is your wife," Crowheart said, gaze fixed on the stranger. "What's her name?" The man's jaw tightened, just slightly, but enough for Crowheart to catch it. "You know her name," he replied. "She's confused, hit her head. But she's coming home." "Her name," Crowheart repeated, voice unreadable but carrying weight like stone. The man hesitated. It was a brief stutter, barely a heartbeat, but it was enough. Her chest seized. He didn't know. He didn't even know the name he claimed belonged to his wife. "Mara," the man said finally, confidence snapping back into place. "Her name is Mara." She staggered backward as the false name echoed in her mind, the same name from the memory that didn't belong to her. Not hers, not her life, not her truth. Crowheart took 1 step forward, muscles tightening beneath his chest, voice dropping to something lethal. "The woman you seek," he said, "is not the woman standing here." The stranger smirked, slow and cruel. "She will remember soon enough, and when she does," his eyes locked on her, chilling in their certainty, "she'll come back where she belongs." Her breath trembled, her fingers clutching Crowheart's sleeve without meaning to, and the stranger's gaze sharpened at the gesture, possessive, furious, territorial in a way that made every hair on her arms rise. "Let me take her," he said, voice thinning with impatience. "You people don't understand. She's my responsibility." Crowheart stepped fully between them now, shoulders squared, stance wide, voice quiet but hard as bone. "She is under Lakota protection." The stranger's smile vanished. "Then you're standing between a man and his wife." "No," Crowheart said, eyes burning with a truth she didn't yet understand. "I'm standing between a hunted woman and the man who broke her memory." And for the first time, fear flickered in the stranger's eyes, not hers, his. The stranger's mask cracked only for a heartbeat, but Crowheart saw it, the flicker of recognition, of calculation slipping, of a man realizing he had underestimated the very people whose land he'd ridden into, and the Lakota warriors around them closed ranks subtly, a tightening of shoulders, a shifting of weight, the quiet forming of a wall that didn't need spoken orders. Still, the man straightened, forcing his smirk back into place as he turned slightly, letting his coat fall open just enough for her to see the holster at his hip, the gleam of polished metal peeking from beneath the leather as he said, "She belongs with me, and you're making a mistake thinking you can keep her." Her breath stalled at the sight of the gun, something inside her flashing with instinctive panic, images of someone shouting, someone grabbing, someone crying out in terror, but none of it clear enough to reach her fully. Crowheart moved that instant, stepping half a stride back so that his body shielded her completely, his voice low, but carrying an undercurrent, sharp as flint. "Holster stays closed," he said, "or you leave this camp without breath in your chest." The stranger's fingers twitched once near his belt, not enough to count as a move, but enough to shift every warrior's stance by a fraction. The tension rippled through the air like the tremor before a storm. She couldn't look away from the man's eyes, how they wandered past Crowheart to her, sharp and greedy, like he was trying to find cracks in her confusion to force himself back into her world. Sweetheart, he said, voice dripping false gentleness, you know me. Look at me. You know who I am. The sickness that rolled through her wasn't a memory, just instinct. Something in her soul recoiled from him, something resisted, something whispered. He is wrong. Crowheart didn't let her answer. She does not know you, he said tightly. She remembers nothing of you, not your voice, not your face, not your name. The stranger's jaw clenched. She's confused, he growled. You savages filled her head with fear. Crowheart didn't flinch, but his hand lowered slightly as if preparing to draw his knife if the stranger's hand moved an inch toward the gun. If she feared anything, Crowheart said, it was before she reached us. The man's eyes narrowed with irritation, but beneath it, something else flickered, a crack, a tell, a shadow of guilt twisting at the edge of his composure. She ran, Crowheart said quietly. Watching the man's reaction with razor precision, someone chased her, someone struck her. She felt herself sway as pain pulsed through her skull at the mention of the blow, and Crowheart steadied her without looking away from the stranger, his hand brushing her elbow with such instinctive care it sent a tremor through her chest. The stranger's expression shifted, a tightening, a freeze, a shadow sliding behind his eyes. Crowheart caught it instantly. You know more than you say, Crowheart murmured, voice dropping to something lethal. You recognized the sacred ground when I mentioned it. The man's breath hitched, barely, but enough for Crowheart's suspicions to ignite fully. No, the stranger said too quickly. I don't know anything about your damn trail. Crowheart stepped forward, closing the distance until the man was forced to tilt his head just slightly upward to meet the warrior's gaze. You lied about her name, Crowheart said. You lied about your claim, and you lied about that trail. The stranger's nostrils flared as if fighting back a surge of anger, but he maintained his brittle composure. I'm taking her, he said. You can't stop me. She chooses, Crowheart replied, not you. The stranger's gaze snapped to her, cold and assessing, trying to force recognition into her eyes by sheer will. You're coming with me, he said, voice soft and sharp as a blade. You know you are. She shook her head, barely able to speak past the tightness in her throat. I don't know you, the man's face hardened. You will. Enough. The single word came from Crowheart, calm but edged with finality. You leave this camp now, the stranger spat at the ground. This isn't over. No, Crowheart said, taking another step forward, standing like a stone wall between her and the darkness clawing toward her past. It is only beginning. The stranger swung back onto his horse, fury simmering just beneath his skin. As he rode off, kicking up the dust, she felt the tremble return to her hands, fear, confusion, and something else she couldn't name. Crowheart turned to her, his voice softer now but heavy with a truth that sent a shiver down her spine. He knows you, Crowheart murmured, but not the way a husband would. She swallowed hard. Then how? Crowheart's gaze held hers with unwavering certainty. Because the way he looked at you. His jaw tightened. I've only seen men look that way at someone they intend to break. Night settled over the camp like a blanket of dark blue cloth, the stars sharp above the prairie and the cold air humming with the low thrum of distant drums as the tribe gathered around the fire circle for the evening rites, the flames rising in sweeping orange arcs that painted every face in gold. Crowheart guided her toward the outer ring, not touching her but close enough that her shoulder brushed the edge of his warmth, and she felt the entire day pressing on her ribs, heavy and confusing, the stranger's voice lingering like smoke in her lungs, twisting with the fragments of borrowed memories that didn't belong to her. The elders moved in a steady pattern, sprinkling crushed sage and sweetgrass into the flames until smoke curled upward in spiraling ribbons. And the medicine woman, the same one who had asked her to breathe the herbs earlier, stepped forward, raising a carved rattle made of gourd and beadwork. Tonight, the elder said gently, we ask the spirits to separate what is yours from what is not. Her breath trembled. I don't know if I'm ready. Crowheart's voice lowered beside her. You are not alone. And something in his tone, quiet, steady, sure, anchored her enough to stay as the elder motioned her forward. She kneeled near the fire, the heat brushing her cheeks, the smoke making her eyes water as the rattle began to shake in a hypnotic rhythm that thudded in time with her heart. "Close your eyes," the elder murmured. She did. Darkness wrapped around her. The smell of burning sage deepened, and then something snapped open inside her mind like a door kicked off its hinges. She sucked in a sharp breath as the fire's crackle blurred into a voice, a woman's voice, screaming through her skull so loudly she jerked backward, but invisible hands held her still, not restraining her, but guiding her. Images surged, a cabin, a dirt path, a woman running, stumbling, hands scraped, breath frantic. She wasn't seeing herself, she was seeing her, the woman from the earlier vision, the woman whose fear had poured into her broken memory. She heard the man shouting behind her, his boots pounding against the earth, his voice cruel and furious, and though she didn't know him in her waking mind, her spirit recoiled from the sound. The stranger. It was him. He had chased the woman in the memory. Her eyes flew open, chest heaving, but the elder pressed a hand to her shoulder. "Let it come," she whispered. "Let it finish." She squeezed her eyes shut again, letting the vision pull her deeper. The woman stumbled near the silver ring trail, clutching something in her hands, something small, something wrapped in cloth, something glinting with moonlight. A necklace. No, the necklace. The one she'd seen in the river in her earlier flash. The one the chief said shouldn't exist anymore. The woman in the memory held it tight, like her life depended on it. The man grabbed her, yanking her backward so violently she fell on the stones, her head striking hard, a sound that echoed through both memory and reality. She gasped in the present moment, hand flying to her own temple as if she could feel the blow. The vision shifted, blurring, burning, and suddenly she wasn't watching the woman anymore. She was the woman. The pain became hers, the fear became hers. The scream tore through her throat and burst into the night air, not imagined but real, echoing across the fire circle harsh enough to make warriors rise to their feet. Crowheart was beside her instantly, arms wrapping around her shoulders as she collapsed forward, breath shuddering uncontrollably. "Enough," he said sharply to the elder. "She's had enough." The rattle stopped, the flames steadied, the vision loosened its grip, dissolving into darkness as she sagged into Crowheart's hold. "I saw her," she choked. "I felt everything." Crowheart's arms tightened around her. "What did you see?" She trembled violently, fingers digging into his shoulder. "The man," she whispered. "The one who came today. He hurt her. He chased her. He killed her." Crowheart's jaw turned to carved stone, his breath leaving him in a cold rush. "The memory you saw," he said slowly, voice tight with rage and realization, "was not a warning." She blinked, tears streaking her cheeks. "Then what was it?" Crowheart's voice dropped to a whisper that shook through her bones. "It was a message." She stared at him, heart thundering. "A message from who?" Crowheart's eyes held hers with devastating certainty. "From the woman he hurt, because she knew you would be next." Crowheart didn't release her until her breathing steadied, but even then he kept a hand on her back as if grounding her to the earth itself. Around them, the fire circle quieted, elders exchanging grim looks, warriors gripping their spears with new purpose, and children ushered away from the flames as if some unseen danger had slipped into the night with the vision she'd witnessed. The medicine woman extinguished a handful of sage in the dirt, her expression tight with worry. "Spirits do not show such pain without reason," she murmured. Crowheart didn't wait for more. He lifted her gently to her feet, guiding her away from the firelight toward the shadowed edge of camp, where the scent of pine thickened and the woods whispered with night wind. She clung to his arm, still shaking, her mind a tangle of images, stones, blood, a silver ring, a woman's scream that felt like her own voice echoing across time. "I don't understand," she whispered as they reached the darker tree line. "Why would I see her death? Why me?" Crowheart stopped beneath a tall cottonwood, moonlight silvering the broad lines of his face. "Because your memory broke in the same place hers did," he said softly. "On the same stones, under the same man's hand." Her knees weakened. "You think he hurt me too?" "I know he did," Crowheart said, voice low, fierce, controlled, with an edge of pain she didn't expect. I could see it in his eyes when he looked at you today, the way he tried to pull truth from your confusion." She pressed a trembling hand to her temple. "But I still don't remember any of it." "You will," Crowheart said, "but not gently." She swallowed hard, trying to breathe through the rising panic. The woods around them rustled, a cold wind slicing through the trees, and the branches creaked like warning bones overhead. "Crowheart," she stepped closer, her voice breaking. "If he killed her, why would he want me?" Crowheart's jaw clenched, his nostrils flaring as he looked out toward the dark prairie beyond the trees. "Because men like him don't stop," he said. "They don't forget what they break, and they don't forgive what escapes them." Her heartbeat staggered. Escaped! The word tasted familiar in her mouth, like something buried deep inside was clawing upward. "I ran," she whispered. In the vision, she ran. I felt her heartbeat like mine. I felt her breath. She gasped. I felt the way she feared looking back. Crowheart turned to her sharply. "What else did you feel?" She pressed her hands to her face, struggling for control. Her steps, they were heavy. She wasn't carrying just herself, something else, something wrapped in cloth. Crowheart's breath hitched. "A child?" She froze. No, I didn't see a baby, but something small, something important." A cold shiver ran across her spine as pieces inside her shifted, tiny cracks forming where truth wanted to break through. Crowheart exhaled slowly, studying her with a mixture of fear and certainty. "He didn't chase her for her," he said. "He chased her for something she carried." "But I wasn't carrying anything," she whispered desperately. Crowheart's eyes locked with hers, steady, dark, unwavering. "You don't know that." A tremor rippled through her body. "What if the memory I saw, what if it wasn't just hers?" Crowheart stepped closer, his hand rising slowly to her cheek, not touching, just near enough for his warmth to steady the panic building behind her ribs. "Say it," he murmured. "What are you afraid it means?" She closed her eyes, breath shaking. "What if I ran the same night she did?" Crowheart swallowed hard. What if she died on that trail? Her throat tightened painfully. "And I didn't." The realization hit like a blow. A sharp, brutal truth her body understood, even if her mind couldn't fully grasp it yet. "He thought I was her," she whispered. "That's why he used her name." "Because he wanted the thing she died protecting," Crowheart said, "and he thought you still had it." She shook her head as tears flooded her eyes. "But what was it? What did she carry?" Crowheart stepped forward until he was close enough that his breath warmed the cold night air between them. "Whatever it was," he said softly, fiercely, "he thinks you're the last one who knows where it went." Wind whipped through the trees. A branch snapped in the distance, too sharp, too deliberate. Crowheart's hand dropped instantly to the knife at his belt, and she realized with a sickening jolt that the past wasn't just reaching for her in visions, it was following her now, in the dark, with footsteps. Crowheart's body moved before her mind even caught up, his arm sweeping her behind him in one fluid motion as he angled his stance toward the sound, every muscle in him tightening, breath leveling, eyes narrowing to slits as the moonlit woods thickened with danger. The campfire was now a distant glow behind them, too far for immediate help, too close for them to flee without being seen, and she felt her pulse hammer against her ribs as the dry leaves beyond the cottonwoods rustled again. Slow, deliberate, as if whoever stood there wasn't afraid of being heard. Crowheart lowered his voice to the faintest whisper. "Stay behind me. Don't run. Don't speak." She clung to the back of his shirt, trembling, as the figure finally stepped from the darkness into a shard of moonlight. The stranger. Alone, no horse, no allies. Just him, coat open, boots muddy, face drawn with a grim, furious determination that told her he hadn't ridden away at all. He had circled the camp like a predator waiting for isolation. "Mara," he said, voice soft, coaxing, the sound of a man pretending to soothe a frightened animal. "You wandered off, come here." Her heart dropped through the earth. He didn't raise his voice, didn't threaten, didn't reach for his gun. That quiet tone was worse. A lie dipped in honey. A tone she felt, deep, instinctively, she had heard before. Crowheart didn't move, didn't blink, didn't breathe louder than a feather. That's not her name, he said evenly. The man's smile sharpened. It's the only name she's ever had. She shook her head. No, it isn't. Sweetheart, his voice snapped like a whip under velvet. You don't get to decide what's true when your mind is broken. The words made her body recoil, but her feet refused to move. Fear froze her, shock pinned her, and a faint pressure behind her eyes throbbed with a brutal ache she couldn't explain. Crowheart stepped forward, blocking the stranger's view of her entirely. You lied, he said. You lied about her name. You lied about being her husband. You lied about that trail. The stranger laughed softly, a cold, hollow sound. Husband, he repeated. I never said that. Crowheart's jaw tightened. Yes, you did. The man tilted his head, moonlight catching the silver ring on his finger. I said she belonged with me. Never said anything about marriage. A chill sliced down her spine. Why did you call yourself her husband? To you? The man shrugged. You were confused. Would have believed anything. That's what frightened people do. They cling to the first voice that claims them. A sickening nausea hit her. Crowheart's fists tightened. What do you want from her? The man's expression shifted. No more softness, no more pretending. Just cold calculation. You know what I want. Say it, Crowheart demanded. The stranger's pale eyes locked onto hers through the sliver of space between Crowheart's shoulder and the tree trunk. Where's the necklace? Her breath vanished. Crowheart froze. She doesn't have it, he said. She didn't even know it existed. Doesn't matter, the man hissed. She saw her. She saw where she fell. He stepped forward. She pressed into Crowheart's back, heart flying into her throat. She knows the ground. She can find it. She remembers nothing, Crowheart growled. But her feet do, the stranger countered. Her body does, and I only need her to walk the path once. Her legs nearly gave out. Why does it matter? The man smiled, a thin, chilling curve. Because what the woman carried wasn't jewelry, Crowheart bristled. Then what? Proof, the man snapped. Proof of what I did, proof of what I was hired to do. She choked on her breath. Hired, not personal, not love, not loss, a job. The woman you saw in your little vision, he continued, staring at her, I was paid to make her disappear, and she would have stayed disappeared if you hadn't run the same trail. Her knees buckled. Crowheart caught her arm before she dropped. She is not your loose end, Crowheart said, voice shaking with fury he barely contained. The stranger's eyes gleamed. She is now. Then everything happened at once. The man lunged. Crowheart grabbed her and spun her behind him. Steel flashed at the stranger's waistband. The woods erupted with shouts from Lakota warriors racing toward them, drawn by the spike of danger, the change in the wind, or perhaps simply the sound of a woman's breath breaking under fear. The stranger's eyes widened at the approaching footsteps, but not with fear, with calculation, with choice. He wasn't here to take her tonight. He was here to mark her, to force the truth up through her shattered memory. He backed away slowly, smirk widening as the first warrior burst through the trees. You'll remember soon, he said softly, eyes locked on her. And when you do, you'll bring me what I need. Then he vanished into the dark. Crowheart held her trembling body against him, breathing hard, fury rolling off him like a storm ready to break. He won't stop, she whispered. No, Crowheart said, but neither will I. And for the first time, she understood. Her past wasn't returning. It was hunting. The warriors searched the woods until the moon sank low and the horizon bruised with the first hint of dawn. But the stranger had slipped into the darkness like a viper, retreating to strike again, leaving behind only boot tracks in the frozen earth and the echo of his threat in her chest. Crowheart stayed with her every step, never more than an arm's length away, guiding her back toward the quiet edge of the camp where the cottonwoods swayed softly and the smoke from the morning fires drifted upward in thin ribbons. She felt hollow and full all at once, empty of answers, yet bursting with fragments that clawed at the inside of her skull, pressing against her mind like something trapped behind a locked door. Crowheart led her to his own lodge, quieter and more sheltered from camp noise, then lowered himself beside her. Sitting close enough that their knees touched, close enough that she felt the trembling inside him, even though his face showed nothing but steady calm. "Breathe," he murmured. "Let the night leave your chest." She tried. But the moment she closed her eyes, the vision returned. Not just the woman running, not just the silver ring, but something new. Something that slammed into her with brutal force. The woman falling on the stones. The stranger's hand grabbing her hair. The scream, not hers, but hers all at once. And then a second voice cutting through it all. A deeper voice. A voice filled with pain. Crowheart's voice. Her breath caught so violently she choked. "Crowheart!" He turned instantly, eyes sharp with concern. She clutched his arm, fingers digging into his skin. "You were there." His breath hitched, just barely, but enough to crack something open between them. She swallowed hard, memory pressing harder, pushing through the cracks. In the vision, when she fell, "I heard your voice. You shouted her name. You tried to reach her." Crowheart closed his eyes, the truth pulling his shoulders down like a weight he'd been carrying alone. "She was my cousin," he said quietly. "Her name was Sani. She disappeared 3 nights before we found you. I searched for her until the moon bled through the pines. I was too late." Her chest knotted painfully. "She died trying to protect something," he continued. "Something the man she fled from didn't want found." "The necklace," she whispered. "It wasn't jewelry." Crowheart nodded. "A token, a mark of truth, proof of what he did, proof someone paid him to do it." Her throat tightened. "But then why me?" Crowheart looked at her. No walls left, no distance, just raw truth. Because Sani wasn't alone when she ran. The world tilted. "Someone was with her," he said softly. "Someone she was trying to protect." And suddenly the locked door inside her mind buckled, cracked, and burst open. She saw it, the trail, the stones, the woman's blood, the stranger's hand smashing down on her head, not because she was Sani, but because she was in the wrong place at the wrong time. She saw herself, not Sani, trying to pull the woman up, trying to shield her, gripping something small and wrapped in cloth, a carved wooden rattle, a baby's rattle. Her breath collapsed. "A child," she whispered, tears flooding her eyes. She was protecting a child. Crowheart's jaw tightened. "Yes. And I was with her," she said, hands shaking. "I tried to pick up the child. I tried to run with her. That's why he thought I knew where the proof was. He thought Sani gave it to me." Crowheart reached for her hands, steadying them between his. "Where's the child now?" She pressed her trembling fingers to her temples. Sani pushed me. She shoved the rattle into my hands. She told me to run. I ran until I couldn't. I hid the child. Her breath broke. "Crowheart, I hid the child so he couldn't kill him." Crowheart inhaled sharply, the fury in him twisting into something else. Hope. "Where?" She closed her eyes again, letting the final fragment rise. A fallen tree, a hollow space beneath the trunk, a rabbit patch close by, water trickling nearby. "By the river," she whispered, "under an old cedar trunk on the northern trail." Crowheart stood in one motion, pulling her up with him. "We go now," he said, "before he finds the trail." But she didn't move, not yet, because one more memory broke through, not a vision of pain, but of warmth. "Crowheart!" He turned, breath ragged. She stepped closer, her fingers brushing the edge of his braids. "When I fell, when he struck me, you were the one who carried me away." Crowheart's eyes softened, everything fierce inside him folding into something gentler. "Your spirit called to me," he whispered, "and I heard you." She stepped fully into his arms then, not out of fear, but because the place she'd been running from had finally collided with the place she was meant to be. And when he wrapped his arms around her, holding her with a kind of care that felt like returning to breath itself, the last piece of her shattered memory slid into place. Not pain, not terror, but truth. She wasn't lost, she was found, and she wasn't alone. Some truths return like thunder, and some slip back softly, carried in the arms of the one soul who never stopped listening. She lost her memory on the stones where another woman fell, but she found her future in the only place that never lied: his arms. If this story held you for even a moment, like, share, and subscribe to Redemption West, where the past can wound, but mercy always leads the way to a second sunrise.